Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Today, I'm taking a break from forecasting and transit work. There's been a lot of intense transits, and I thought it would be a good time to take a little segue break into a birth chart. So, I do this because I also know that there's a lot of people out there who are studying on their own who maybe don't have the time or the energy or resources to pour themselves into a formal course. So I try to make some of this available from time to time because when I was learning by myself, I always was so thankful when I found astrologers who were actually showing me how to interpret charts because I was piecing a lot of it together on my own in the very beginning. So hopefully this is returning the favor and helping some other people out with that. Um, in the meantime, I also do this to promo my upcoming courses. I have a new course starting on Saturday called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. Everything that I'm doing with this chart are the kinds of things that you'll learn to do in my program. So you can check that out on my website, nightlightastrology.com. Starts on Saturday. Early bird rates still in effect. Payment plans are there. We have need-based tuition if you need it for, especially if you're dealing with issues due to COVID, you've lost your job or something like that. But there's a whole different list of people who may qualify for need-based tuition. So you can check that out. If you have any questions, email us info@nightlightastrology.com. All right, we're going to jump into this chart now. So thank you to my client who gave me permission to look at her chart. I want to just illustrate a few things and tell you how they turned out. So when I was sitting down and prepping her chart, what I noticed right away is that, okay, first of all, you can tell, hey, look, here's the sun and the moon across the first and seventh house axis. The ascendant ruler in Cancer is also the moon. So we have the sun and the moon and the ascendant ruler as the moon. That gives a lot of power to the moon in this chart, right? And then all of a sudden, sun's in Cancer, moon sign, ascendant is in Cancer, moon sign, and the moon was just eclipsed. If you trace this back just a little bit, the moon is just past full and setting in the west, while the sun is rising in the east. If you track this back one day, there would have been a lunar eclipse in Capricorn. Ancient astrologers paid a lot of attention to the prenatal lunation, the most recent full or new moon before your birth. So here we have a prenatal lunation that is an actual eclipse of the moon in Capricorn in the seventh house. Now that is going to shape or say something very powerful about this native's destiny when it comes to marriages or relationships, or even in a broader sense, sexual identity, as well as potentially the social background, which is a larger theme of the seventh house, a sort of social dimension of our lives, as well as potentially the family's involvement with either of those areas, marriage, relationships, what was modeled by parents in marriage or relationships, or the social dimension of life as it was modeled by family. So those are kind of the themes that we put together in a broad sense to start with. And I noticed that because the moon was eclipsed, that it is likely that there are going to be massive changes in this lifetime within that area. The eclipse is sort of an omen that not only is this area of the chart very important, but it's also an area of the chart where we are going to see major transformation of circumstance occur in the native's life as the lifetime goes on. That's what it means to see the moon setting there after having just been eclipsed. Now, the moon is in its detriment in Saturn's sign, and we can point down to the fourth house, again, a place of home, family, roots, land, property. We see an exalted Saturn with the Mars. So when I was first looking at this, for example, I'll just jot down images and ideas of what this might look like. Could it be that this person grew up in maybe a strict family, strict religious family, strict military family, very, very hardworking family that emphasized productivity over, say, interpersonal closeness? That's something that a Capricorn moon in the seventh is, frankly known for, right? Can be a little cold socially, but can be also known for being very reputable, hardworking, trustworthy, oftentimes will achieve greater merit and status because the person is generally seen by others as a trustworthy, hardworking person. So that's the moon in Saturn sign in the seventh. And probably related, again, when I'm turning out these images, I'm going, oh, is it a military family? Or was dad and mom, were they attorneys? It's the Saturn and Mars down in the fourth in the balance. Were they lawyers or, something like that? Okay, so those are just some guesses, but the idea here with the recently eclipsed moon is that there is going to be a dramatic shift or change due specifically to the eclipsing of the moon in this house. When you look at the context of the other placement in the chart, the sun was rising when this person was born. And that means that as the recently eclipsed moon is setting with this kind of Saturn-Mars, exalted Saturn-Mars combination supporting it from the house of home and family, that the sun in Cancer is rising. Now, when I look at that, I thought to myself, this person, as is really normal for sun in the first house kind of people, is probably going to have to take some risks in this lifetime socially, maybe in terms of identity, sexual, social identity, or that they're going to have to depart somehow from the standards or norms that their parents provided socially, in some broad sense, that they're going to have to redefine their life path and move away from the way in which the life path was established or impressed upon them by the conditioning of home and family. Now, that's all just reading that eclipse and then juxtaposing it with the sun in the first house, a place that has a lot to do with autonomy and agency. However, it is also possible, because we're talking about an eclipse with the sun in the first house in the moon sign, that this person is also following in the footsteps of a family pattern, which would involve breaking away from tradition or breaking away from, certain kinds of social environments, or, perhaps more confining or restrictive elements, that there's been a story in the family of needing to break away from that, and this person is following suit in some way. So these are the kinds of possibilities that I wrote down in advance. It would also be possible that these themes repeat in marriage, such as marrying someone who is more conservative than yourself and having to liberate yourself from it later, or, getting into a relationship that's very conservative in some or restrictive in some way, and then having to learn how to take risks and be more of your own person later. So it could have something to do with marriage or the reality of marriage. Well, this person has not been married, so that didn't end up playing into it. But now, the other thing that factors in here is when I look at that seventh house, I'm going, okay, love, relationships, etc. I always look at Venus. When I start seeing a lot of action in the seventh house, I go, okay, where's Venus, right? Well, here's Venus in the 12th house, a place that is not always well seen or even well integrated into our consciousness. It's a place that can be a bit of a blind spot. It can be a self-destructive place. Hidden and secretive things can belong to the 12th house, among lots of other possibilities. But I see Venus in Gemini, right? Venus in Gemini is one of when I see this, right, juxtaposed to this, I go, I wonder if this person ends up having affairs because of overly restrictive marriages. Now, again, this person hasn't had a marriage, so I didn't get that one right. But I'll start piecing together other elements of the chart, specifically tying them into things that I'm already observing. What might it mean if what I'm thinking is true about the moon and its eclipse in the 7th house in Capricorn? What might it mean that Venus is in the 12th? So one of the things that I wrote down was, is it possible that true interests, flirtatious desires, a taste for variety and different things is somehow being repressed, or is part of the picture of repression that the Capricorn moon in the 7th could possibly represent? So that was another note that I had. Now, another thing that's really interesting about this one is, again, with the sun in the first house, the North Node will really amplify it. In ancient astrology, the North Node is a bit like Jupiter. It really makes things bigger. And so the North Node really amplifying the importance of the sun as it's rising, whereas the South Node, which is a bit more like Saturn, is very diminishing and has this, this power to, it's contributing to the idea of the death of the moon. The moon's just got an eclipse, the moon's setting, the moon is in Saturn's power, the moon is with the South Node, which is like Saturn. But that starts to feel like something of a pent up or repressed social environment or marital environment. And again, probably related back to family somehow. So that sun in the first house really starts to amplify, do your own thing, take some risks, search for that greater emotional vulnerability that may not come out as much because of what we're seeing in the 7th. And then Venus and Mercury in the 12th just kind of amplify that there might be a side to this person socially, sexually, romantically that is not necessarily getting to express itself in a clear and open way. So, okay, so now here's the story. I thought this was really interesting. So this person has worked as a bartender in the service industry for over 20 years, or about 20 years, maybe just a little less than 20 years. I'm trying to remember. It's right around 20. Um, and so, and they grew up in a family that owned a restaurant. Okay, so they grow up, here it is, right? They grow up in restaurants, in a family that owns restaurants. It's very hardworking, good business people, smart business people in the family, very hardworking in the service industry. Hardworking, not necessarily emotionally expressive or vulnerable. Okay. Now, what's so interesting is as her mom and dad aged, they came to realize that this environment was somewhat constrictive and that there were things that would fill them with more joy that they wanted to do more of, that they weren't doing enough of. Dad, for example, decided after closing the restaurant to start up a project that would have them in nature with plants and gardening and things like that, like landscaping and things like that. So wanted to move closer to nature and not such a high-paced, stressful environment. Mom decided that she was thinking about going to law school, ended up deciding that she wanted to be in social work and helping other people. You see how both of those are pointing toward the Cancer in the first house. Why? Because what we're considering with Cancer in the first house metaphorically is, what brings my own soul joy. And so the parents and their path out of a more what do I want to say, like hard work, early bird catches the worm, but also potentially burnt out dynamic in their lives with their careers. This is the social environment that she grew up in, comes to an end, and they say, what do I want that's going to make me happy? I want to be close to nature, says dad. I want to help other people, says mom. And so they depart from the restaurant industry. Well, she didn't. From the time she was a young girl, she was working in her parents' restaurants, and she continued working as a bartender, almost up to 40. So, the pattern that we're seeing here is the same. And, when I laid all of this out, what she said was, like, first of all, you just watch someone seeing it all click. Oh, wow. Yeah. So this pattern is repeating, and I'm not happy doing what I'm going to do. And do you see any time coming up in which the pattern might change? So first of all, usually when a person says something like that, there's a belief, a subconscious belief, that they're not in control of their own destiny, or that their choices don't matter, that they may find that there's some external force or factor that needs to play in before they can start doing something that they really want to do. That's Saturn speaking. That's the Saturn moon in the seventh house with Mars and Saturn at the base of the chart speaking. It's the sense of, well, you just do this because you're good at it and you've always done it, et cetera, even though it doesn't really feel like you. So then this person, said, yeah, and actually that was one of the big questions I had for today, which is, I don't feel like I want to keep doing this. When do you see the, potential for change in a different direction? And that's exactly what we would expect. Like I said earlier, you would expect that the native might follow in the footsteps of a family pattern of breaking out of some kind of dynamic, or of having to break from some kind of family pattern in the past. So, oftentimes I'm used to seeing it where a person has to break away from a family dynamic to become their own person. In this case, even her parents are saying, you need to do something different. You really need to get out of this. And they're encouraging her, like they did, to make a change out of the restaurant industry. I thought that was really fascinating. And then I said, I think that it's potential that this could also play a role in marriage and relationships. Have you been married? No. And I said, is there any way in which, she said, I always hold myself back from, relationships. Like, I'm really like, not sure that I really want them. I'm looking at Venus in the 12th again and going, well, what have the most important relationships in your life been, and have they all been above the board? In other words, have they been secrets? Have they been affairs? Have they been longings that have gone unfulfilled? Like, what does Venus in the 12th house have to say about this, especially in Gemini, where, Venus is really usually very flirty and kind of, what would I say? Like, more eager for connections, maybe multiple connections, but like very eager to connect socially in an air sign. She said, well, the longest relationship that I've ever had was a kind of a love affair with someone who's already in a relationship, and it's also a woman. Right. So, and that was like, first of all, that came very late in the session after I had already been trying to get at this side of the chart, this side of the chart where the Capricorn moon might be saying something about marriage and relationships and ways in which we hold ourselves back somehow. So again, you see the Venus in the 12th and you go, okay, there's some well-kept secrets here. And sure enough, a long-time lover that, and she said, I don't feel gay. I don't feel like I'm one thing or another. I'm just, for whatever reason, this is someone that I've had this really intense connection with. And I don't feel like I'm a sexual person or an asexual person, a straight or a gay person. Right. And that's very, also, I think, not all the time, but you'll often see that kind of mentality of real openness to different kinds of romantic experiences or whatever with planets in Gemini. But here they're well-kept secrets in the 12th, but that's playing back into, again, what, right? That's playing right back into the need to let go of different kinds of potential social conditioning in one's social life, or fear, or a more conservative or restrictive quality. And so, another thing that we talked about was, when is the most likely time to see some movement in terms of love and relationships? Well, this is where transit work comes in. And so if you can imagine, my year 1 program is 1 year just teaching us how to unpack charts so that we can come up with simple lists like the ones that I came up with for this reading that become so, they're so accurate. They even if you don't get it concretely specific, thematically, archetypally, in the specific areas of the chart, you're right on the money, right? All of that kind of work is what we do in my first year program, just learning how to unpack charts. The second year program is when we learn how to do transit work to time out when the karma appears and when the opportunity for changing karma appears in our life. So in her case, we're talking about the next most imminent transit to the moon that's long lasting, that has a chance to potentially really rewire some of that more Saturnine karma in the 7th house. That's Pluto. So we traced out the aspects that Pluto will make, the conjunction that Pluto will make to the moon. There's 3 of them in 2022, at which point it would not be surprising if there was a theme of very intense and deep transformation and catharsis around her social identity and her relational identity. Well, what does that mean in this case? Again, read it in the context of the chart: moon setting, sun's rising. Moon was just eclipsed. Well, that in this case would probably mean that she's stepping into a new sense of herself in the world. And the most general way in which her life is defined socially is in terms of the restaurant industry, in which she feels rather confined. So probably that new identity will mean a new job. And I said, well, what kind of job are you considering? She said, nursing, right? Very Cancer sun. So that transformation could very well occur when Pluto goes over the moon in the 7th. The other thing that would make a lot of sense would be for her to have a relationship at that point, or an opportunity for a relationship appear that is much more out in the open, but that causes her to have to take risks and be more vulnerable. Again, pointing towards the sun in the 1st house. Okay, so maybe the last thing that would happen would be fitting, given the family history, would be that Pluto moon conjunction also emphasizes the generational transformation. Mom and dad, for example, in her life, are close to retirement. They're really saying, hey, go do something different. Could it be that they're retiring, or that as they're making another important life change, that she's also making one? Because see how closely her karma is aligned with the karma of her family. And you see this in part because the sun in the 1st house, which is here in a sense all about individuation and becoming yourself, is still going to be intimately related back to the moon, which is one of the emblems of the family. And then you've got the Saturn Mars down in the 4th house. So it's a funny thing because usually I'm seeing clients and I'm used to helping them individuate away from their family, because the family has had some pattern that has not been so healthy for them. Like that's very common. It's not as often that I see someone who's saying, hey, my family set out a path for me and they're all cheering for me to follow it, and I need to make some of the similar steps that my family made, but I'm having trouble making. In this case, stepping away from that service industry that she finds really, really exhausting and sort of confining, and going and doing something that's more in touch with her own joy, her happiness, her needs, etc. So isn't this just a fantastic, it was just so many good illustrations of the astrology in this chart, and I was really thankful for her to sharing it. So the Pluto moon transit coming up in a couple of years, also in the next year and a half, this person does have eclipses coming up over that Venus and Mercury in the 12th house. Likely that there's going to be changes coming in that area of life, relationships, especially ones that are maybe more hidden or secretive, but potentially those that have a harder time expressing themselves openly. There's going to be changes around those relationships. That's also potentially an opportunity for the karma to change. So, when you're having an astrology reading, one of the things that an astrologer should help you do is become aware of where the karma is, what its patterns are, and also when you get eclipses, when you get big transits, hey, these are opportunities to actually change the pattern, because we do have free will, right? So anyway, one thing that I want to end with is you'll notice that the way that I lay out the possible interpretations before I see a client, those are archetypally broad, meaning that I patch together a series of potential themes and interactions of themes, but they're still very specific to certain areas of life, marriage, social life, family in this case, and how that shapes her reality. When we're looking at a chart, the thing that will throw people off is that if you try to throw, it's like if you try to throw a dart at the dartboard and you're trying perfectly to hit the bullseye with an astrology reading, you're likely to miss the board altogether. But if you just try to hit the board, if that's your goal, is just be in the vicinity of the bullseye, just hit the board, you're much more likely in an astrological predictive sense to hit the bullseye. That's because the symbols are not fixed, they're multivalent. And so when you approach a reading, what I teach students to do, and what I hope this video gives you a sense of, is how to focus in on an assembly of important themes, most likely archetypal themes within specific areas of life. Then when you talk to a client about it, you'll get the backstory and it'll all fit together beautifully. It's so amazing to see that play out in readings. And that's the magic of astrology that also captures other people, so that when it then comes time to talk about, well, how does the pattern change? When is the transit come that could change it? The person feels like they're living in a reality where destiny is real, where their agency and their participation in destiny is real. And that can create a lot of incentive in a person to make positive change. So remember, don't try to hit the bullseye, try to hit the board. When you shoot for the board, you get close to the bullseye. If you try to hit the bullseye and get super, super concrete and specific, you'll almost always miss radically. And clients are not nearly as happy with a reading when an astrologer sits down and gets a whole bunch of things, very specifically concrete things, wrong, than they are if an astrologer sits down and gets very close to the archetypal essence of the gifts and strengths of the chart in the specific areas of the chart. So try to stay, try to keep your interpretations, try to put them together in a narrow way, but try not to make concrete, super specific predictions about that ballpark that you're playing in, if that makes sense. Okay, that's what I've got for today. This has been kind of impromptu. I just wanted to create some different content for this week because, there's been so much stress and drama, and it's good to just zoom back out a little bit and just look at some charts and remember the joy of doing this. Like that's where my joy is interpreting charts, hearing people's stories, going like, wow, that's just so incredible. It couldn't be more accurate to see, that story with Venus in the 12th and the secret love affair with her friend or the woman in her life, etc. So, astrology can be, even just studying astrology can be such a balm. So I hope that you've gotten a little bit of that. And again, thanks to my client for letting us look at her chart. If you are interested in my class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, check it out on my website, nightlightastrology.com. We start this Saturday. There's need-based tuition. There's an early bird discount. You can save $500 off if you register before this Saturday. There's also a payment plan if you need it. So I look forward to hopefully seeing some of you in class soon, and I look forward to hearing your comments and reflections on this birth chart reading. All right, take it easy, everyone. Bye.